Hello, this is Purbayan Chatterjee, and you are listening to Stalwarts of Music with Aditya Veera.
Hi, sir. Namaste. Welcome to Stalwarts of Music. It's such an incredible privilege to have you on the show.
Namaste, and thank you for having me on the show. And I'm incredibly delighted to, share little nuggets about music and about the creative process with you, Aditya.
I couldn't be more excited. Shall we get started?
Absolutely. Let's get to it.
So, Purbayan, you have felt the sitar as something, very genetic, right? You've always had the flair for music, needless to say. But does the sitar as an instrument feel something very natural to someone like you?
So, I think it was more a case of the sitar choosing me than me choosing the sitar, because I picked up the sitar when I was all of 5 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I didn't pick it up by choice. I was in Switzerland touring with my dad, and I think I was being a naughty little kid. And there was this little sitar lying around, which belonged to the son of a student of his. And so it was an entirely, I wouldn't say an accidental choice, but I would say a preordained choice, where he thought that it will probably quieten me down a little bit. I don't think that happened, but I started playing the sitar nevertheless. And in fact, it's interesting because just the day before yesterday, I was in Kolkata, and I was going through old photos and trying to archive some of those memories. And I came across a photo of myself, and I held the sitar for the first time.
Oh, wonderful. But would it be right to say that since you had music running in the blood, your dad was already, into this realm, it sort of gave you like an upper hand in terms of, getting accustomed to this instrument and getting into the flow of it?
Well, it always does. And I mean, in Hindi, we have this word called sanskar.
Right.
And I think it's a very important word. It is a very global word also. I don't know what the English translation for it, but we say things like DNA, and we say things like cultural conditioning. But sanskar is a very all-encompassing word. So when you're born into a family where there's a certain kind of art form, or even a certain vocation or profession that is practiced very passionately, I think the main thing you do, other than, of course, collecting all the information in your subconscious mind, but the main thing that you inherit is the passion for that, for that kind of vocation. So the interesting thing is, it works in two ways. Either you inherit the passion and you carry forward that vocation, or you completely go the other way. I've seen examples where people are like, oh, my dad has done this, we have like 3 generations of this, and now I'm done with it, I want to do something different. But in my case, I think, generationally speaking, my dad's generation was the generation which was getting started with trying to make a career out of music. My grandfather and grandmother were both musicians, but they had other professions. With my dad, he always wanted to make a career in music, which for him was difficult because he was supporting the family. And when you are, it's an interesting thing which I do want to mention in the course of things is, especially in our country, there is a whole a need to be tethered to some kind of family, some kind of hierarchy, which so in our family, we had to kind of figure things out on our own. My dad did, and then it took one generation of hardship, one generation of a lot of frustration and pain, which then helps the next generation, which was your moot point, which was your question to begin with. So when I started off, there was some things which were figured out, but there were a lot of things which I had to figure out on my own. Of course, not without the help and support of great stalwarts like my dad's guru, Ustad Ali Akbar Khan Sahib, like like Nikhil Banerjee, who my dad has learned from. In subsequent years, great legends of music like Ustad Zakir Hussain, like Pandit Anindo Chatterjee, who sort of told my dad, Pandit Ajay Chakravarti, from whom I learned vocal music for a while. They gave us the assurance that, okay, this kid can try and take music up, and so many others. I mean, we met Pandit Hari Prasad Chaurasia, and in my formative years, these people did put a hand in blessing on my head and say that, okay, this kid should try But it was, it's not the same thing as being family, of course, although I'm immensely grateful to all of them. So it was not an easy path
Yeah.
initially.
Yeah.
And sometimes I look back, and the only thing I have in my heart is gratitude, for the fact that through the fog, there are some things which seem a little clearer now.
Interesting. You mentioned of a very long lineage of the people that you were involved with. So me and our listeners would like to understand as to what is the kind of tradition in terms of the form, the strand, the heritage, the kind of music that you personally embody, and could you illuminate as to what is its form, what genre does it bear, and what are some of the characteristics of your music?
So, Ustad Zakir Hussain is somebody I regard in my heart as like an all-round guru for me.
Okay, okay.
Not only in terms of um, his musical sensibility, which we always borrow so much from, and he's kind enough to let us in a little bit too. But generally, even philosophy, generally even how you need to look at life, how you need to look at music. And he recently did an interview where he spoke about tradition, and he said, I have used this quote in so many of my interviews, and I have to credit it to this great man, where he said, tradition is like a point in time which is tethered to a certain time in history, but it's a moving point. So
Right.
interesting thing about Indian classical music is it's thousands and thousands of years old. We ascribe it back to the Vedas, and
Yeah.
yet it has gone through a process of incredible metamorphosis. With every passing generation, I would say there is
Yeah.
something which is added and something which is taken out, but more a case of addition, because if you look at the history of our country, the cultural history of our country, our music wouldn't have been what it is without the flux that our country went through. So
Yeah.
it's much more than just a cultural sort of melting pot, or a cultural a process of almost grinding things together. But it is social, it is political, it is socio-economic. In terms of North Indian classical music, which is called Hindustani music, it's great. It has a great deal of influence from Persian music, and that's what we talk about Amir Khusru, and without getting into too much detail, but even instruments like the sitar are essentially fusion. It's a fusion of an instrument like the veena, which is a traditional Indian instrument which was used for this form called Drupad, and then you had the Persian, the setar,
Okay. Okay.
or the zither. Now, who knows? Like, all of these are nomenclature. There's the zither, there's the setar, and then there's the sitar. So
Yeah.
somebody at some point in time, most people say it was Amir Khusru, sort of took the veena and took one of these instruments, and thought to themselves that, okay, let's figure out how we can put these two cultures together. The sitar is iconic that way. It's because it shows not only a coming together of two musical cultures, but the coming together of two people. And that's how tradition is. And that it's like 2 points traveling through time, colliding and making a third trajectory, for this particular instrument. And if you look at Carnatic music, the way it flourished down in the South, there are so many, of course, in the South, they kept their tradition much more intact, because for the simple reason that politically the South was a little insulated. If you look at
Yeah. Yeah.
even the British, times, when the imperial times, when our country was ruled by the British, you would see the South was a little sort of what shall I say, impervious to that. So the the effect of Persian music, or subsequently even the effect of symphonic Western classical music, and then jazz music. Well, jazz music, not so much. That was a much later time in history.
Right.
So that is tradition for you. The point I'm trying to make is that is tradition for you. And in the midst of this tradition, we learn ragas and we learn. That is your initial data. It's like the operating system of the phone. You boot up. I booted up with all this information. And then once you boot up, you are instantly connected to the internet, just like so many of our devices. Once you connect to the internet, you're constantly downloading this app, that app, and there's all this plethora of information, which makes your music what it is. So you have to allow yourself to embrace all that. And one of those things from a very young age for me was jazz music. You know, I was there was a friend of my dad's, one gentleman called Badul Rai, in Washington D.C., and he gave my dad all these spool, you know, like tapes of artists like Miles Davis, of Ornette Coleman, and we used to have this machine called a quadraphonic system where you have spools, and then you have this thing which looks like a cassette but is really like a spool cartridge, which you stick in to the side. And I still have a memory of listening to Ornette Coleman, to Miles Davis, to Louis Armstrong, and jazz music. You know, I felt like while I was learning ragas, I saw a kind of similarity in trajectory, because I realized that every note was being made up in the moment. But also I noticed that, wow, man, this is melodically very different. I didn't understand harmony back then. It took a good couple of decades to understand that there exists this thing called harmony, and there is this world of chords which can make the same note sound, the exact same musical note sound different every minute you use a different chord, you know, in the backdrop. And that is what I think makes some of my music what it is today. That is what makes a project like Classic Cool what it is, because there's an influence of syncopation from jazz, and why look as far as jazz, and then I forayed into Carnatic music also. I played, lucky enough to play with a lot of the legends from the south of India, and all that information sort of assimilated in my brain. Classic Cool is something which happened many years ago, mind you. The first time I thought of incorporating harmony or incorporating some of these sounds in my music was quite a few years ago. And then I did this album called Unbounded, which was during COVID times, where we had a lot of Grammy winners, which was a much deeper foray into the world of harmony. But this year I just decided to relaunch Classic Cool, and I felt like I could give it a new sound and a new feel in terms of, so we did it as a live EP where we just sat in the room, rehearsed each piece a few times, and then went for a take.
Incredible. Firstly, it was quite intriguing in terms of the whole lineage that you spoke of, as to how this music has evolved, classical music has evolved over time.
I think I might have answered like 3 or 4 of your questions.
You surely did. You surely did it in a proper sequence and in a layered format. But it still remains a mystery to me. If you speak about jazz music or any other Western form, you have stuff written down, right?
Yes.
Especially when it's classical, Indian classical musical forms, it's just the transmission from guru to the student, and it's been so many years, and people have sort of embodied it in its purity of its form, even though there's no written text, and you're able to reciprocate the same that was done 100 years ago, which is quite a mystery to me, in terms of how it's been transmitted in its purity of its form over the years. I was having a very interesting conversation about this with Mr. Julian Lag, who in fact studied a little bit of
guitar player.
Yeah. He studied Indian classical music too.
He did. In fact, I was lucky enough during COVID times. It was one of the very few performances we could watch, online, a performance of that standard of Ustad Zakir Hussain, Charles Lloyd, and Julian Lag.
Yeah.
And you could tell that, of course, Zakir Bhai, and he was actually doing some singing. But even these 2 other gentlemen, Mr. Charles Lloyd and Julian Lag, were into the Indian, musical forms.
Sure. And you also did mention about Unbounded. It's so diverse in terms of, it's like a buffet when I listen to it. It's got some of the finest musicians in the world, ranging from Jordan Rudess to Annette Cohen, Gary Husband, Bella Flake, and of
Indeed.
course, Shankar Mahadevan Saab and Wali Fateh Ali Khan. So many incredible musicians and such an incredible album in terms of the musicality. But did you feel the album received the appreciation it deserved? Did it reach the milestones you had set when you were trying to put it out, when you were trying to strategize the release? What do you think? How did it do?
So, Aditya, first up, I'm incredibly lucky and blessed that all these musical giants agreed to come together. I think it was partially providence because it was COVID,
Okay.
and I think a lot of these people had taken time out of I mean, they had to take time out of their touring schedules.
Right.
So they made themselves available to collaborations, but still, I'm lucky that they considered my project worthy enough to, I mean, people like Bela Fleck,
Yeah.
I mean, you hardly see them going out there and collaborating with a lot of,
Yeah.
lot of
Yeah.
these people. But I have also to thank again Ustad Zakir Hussain, who's such a mentor. He made it happen, especially in terms of bringing Bela Fleck in. And also there was a lot of advice coming, I mean, I started this collaboration by talking to Antonio Sanchez. And
Oh,
so
lovely.
a special shout out to him. He was the first one who gave me the belief that, oh, I mean, something like this could be done. Now, to answer your other question directly, where you're talking about if I feel that the album received the kind of, see, Aditya, you start off a project like this, not only with a lot of passion, it is something that you think in your mind uh, is going to be the best ever. You have to believe. It's a little bit like every individual believing that their kid is a special kid. I
Okay.
think every parent in the world, when their kid is born, they look into their kid's eyes or the face and think, oh man, what an angelic smile. No other kid in the world has this smile. And that's how it is with albums and things that you do. Um, so I started out with that belief system, and I created in that time what I believed in. And I think that's the only thing which matters. And the good thing about publishing music is it stays out there. Once you put it out there, it is its own animal. There is never knowing how and when it resonates in the minds of people. Now, if somebody like you tells me that you enjoyed this song or that song from the album, and if you think it's a musical buffet, then it is exactly what it was intended to be. It was intended to be a buffet.
Yeah.
Now, when you think of the awards, and things like that, often there are other paraphernalia at work there. There are
Okay.
also, it depends in what is, um, as I said, music is so much a reflection of the geopolitics of a certain kind of time, you
Mm-hmm.
know, and the social and political. So as it happened that when I released this album, there was this, if you remember, there was this whole campaign of Black Lives Matter, and
Yeah.
there was this whole thing with this Floyd, dying, and it was so I think that took on a big sort of part of that year's musical focus. There were people putting out wonderful music, I must say.
Yeah.
People like
Yeah.
Anderson Park. I heard some of his stuff that he put out, when he put out stuff in the lockdown also.
Sure. Yeah.
It's a lockdown. The song is called The Lockdown, and I
Yeah.
was myself hooked onto it. So as I said, so you have no control over the destiny of a certain musical project or album.
Yeah.
But I mean, I may think that it did or did not receive the kind of critical acclaim or the kind of commercial acclaim that, but who knows, maybe I am hopeful that someday, even commercially speaking, somebody's going to say, hey man, we never looked at this project, let's do a live concert of this, or let's put it out again, or something like that. At the same time, you may think that it's if you look at numbers or whatever on Spotify or Apple Music, you may think a certain type of music has lesser numbers, but sometimes you will be surprised to see the number of people. I mean, I travel, like I was just in Australia, and literally everybody I met has heard the album.
Hmm.
So there are two sides to everything, and there is always a little disappointment and a little joy. I'm
Yeah.
happy to take it as it comes, you know.
It definitely is a treasure trove in terms of the musicality and the music, and I'm sure people can consume it, like you said, at any point of time. So yeah, that's
It's out
indeed,
there. It's
yeah,
out there. I mean,
yeah,
I would rather that 10 years down the line, people remember and say, this was, what a special project, rather than, the project wins 10. I mean, of course, I would be very happy to win an award or two,
yeah,
but I would rather that it is remembered over a longer period. And that's the nature of our music. That's the nature of
yeah,
improvised music. That is the nature of this niche kind of music that we try to put out there. We go into it with full knowledge and full awareness that this is not a music which is commercial. This is
yeah.
not a music which is based on numbers. We make the music because we are drawn to it.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
But that being said, is the intent when you were trying to work on this particular album to just make the music and have several layers of refinement and put it outward, not bearing the audience in mind? Was that the intent?
Um, Honestly, I think all the people who have made great music, I'm not talking about myself, I'm talking about people who won Grammys and won other awards.
Yeah,
I think they never set out to make a certain kind of music for a certain kind of audience. See, that's the kind of music that's the kind of music you make when you set out to make the music for a film or for an ad jingle. You're told that, okay, here's the visual, and now you've got to add you know
yeah,
something musically to it, and so there's a brief. But one of the things about making independent music is you are telling the story that is in your heart. So yes, to answer your question, I did not think of an audience. I just wanted to play some music with Antonio Sanchez, with Ustad Zakir Hussain, with Bela Fleck. I just wanted to, when I heard Bela playing something on the banjo, I mean, I've attended his live shows for many years and also heard many of his recordings. I was always kept thinking, oh, just if I could add that little murki to this, or this, musical phrase to this from this raga. So, and this was just a manifestation of that.
right now it's frozen in time, and yeah, and I'm sure people at least receive it and start listening to it over the years because it's such an incredible release, and yeah, I'm proud of it that it's
Well,
from
I'm so thankful. I'm
someone
glad
in
to
India.
feel so,
Yeah,
and I'm sure there are many like you,
yeah, yeah,
and it makes the effort worth it.
yeah, yeah. Let's talk a little bit about your learning, right? Like, so you did learn a great deal of music involving the Guru Shishya system, if I'm not mistaken,
I
where there
did.
was considerable amount of transmission from people like your father, and you learned, I think you learned vocals from Pandit Ajoy Chakrabarti at
I
a
did.
certain point, and you must have gone through this formal, structured learning process where you've learned academic and theoretical aspects of music with equal proportion. So, what emphasis would you give to students of this particular generation who are trying to learn something like this in terms of the whole transmission process, which was, which was a thing back in the day, and I'm sure uh, a little bit of that is still prevalent.
See, I'll tell you, Aditya, something that I believe from the bottom of my heart. I think the Guru Shishya Parampara, in other words, the mentor-mentee relationship,
Yeah,
is universal, global, and without replacement. You can only learn an art form or a craft or a vocation, even if it is just, fixing cars.
yeah,
You can only learn uh, the depths of it if you connect emotionally, mentally with a mentor who feels equally inclined to transmit, no matter how much written information there is. Now, this is the interesting thing. If you look at, maybe other forms of music, maybe Western music, it is amazing how much archived and documented material. Like if I really wanted to learn about triads, I could just go online
Yeah.
and and go and look at 5 or 6 YouTube videos and gather the information. Now, that information is a little bit like gathering raw material. The food is not cooked, it's raw. You would learn about triads, sure, but you wouldn't learn how to use them. You wouldn't learn the relationships between notes and how you can use them in a musical context, in the context of a harmonic progression, and how you can make you can't learn how to make music from YouTube. I'm convinced of this. I am totally convinced of this. That requires, at least at some level, somebody giving you the key, as it were, and unlocking something for you. So yeah, yes, in my case, you say it was structured, but a lot of it was also unstructured. I started with my dad. I would sit down. It was unstructured in the sense that a lot of it was just listening to him practice. There were a lot of these tabla players who would come home when I was a kid. A lot of it is also just feeling like any other kid does. They want to do what their dad does, right? Or they want to do what somebody who is a father figure. I mean, when we watch Zakir Bhai on stage, we all want to be him. When we watch Ajay Chakravarti sing, we all want to be him. We all want to think like him, right? So a lot of, and then that's what brings you close to your mentor, whoever are your mentors. And then in a later stage in my life, it was Shankar Mahadevan. Even to this day, I mean, I'm so grateful for what he has brought to our lives. There is so much about music so that's why when we say that the process of learning continues for a lifetime, you're not being humble just like that. Actually, it's heartfelt. It's not, you hear it and you think, oh yeah, right. I mean, here's this great musical masters, because all the masters say it, but they all mean it. I mean, even to this day, I know the Shakti is on tour. They're doing their 50th anniversary tour. I listen to their concert or listen to their album and I say, man, I wish I could make music like that. And that's the process of learning. And then you have to have the proximity and the access to one of those masters or a multitude of those masters who then tell you things like little nuggets of advice, like, music is made in the moment, live in the moment, learn to make good musical choices in the moment. These are fundamentals, but this is the stuff that you can't search out on YouTube or Google. And especially when it comes to you with the conviction and the belief of a master who has dedicated all their life for the art form, that's when you begin assimilating it. So that's when as we say it, that's when the food gets cooked, and then that's goes into your blood and becomes part of your DNA.
Interesting. Again, you mentioned about Shankarji. It just popped into my head out of nowhere. Shanmuga Priya is a song that I always listen to when I'd like to be in a blissful state of mind or in a state of anand in your realm, right? And funny, you said you spoke about the whole YouTube idea, and a lot of the newer generation is quite result oriented when it comes to learning music within a short span of time, right? So over the years, there's been considerable amount of globalization of culture to the kind of things students are exposed to, outside their musical institution or outside their homes. So what do you think is happening to their sensibilities and to their abilities in terms of absorbing and responding to the classical traditions that you're trying to keep alive?
Yeah, I'll tell you one thing, Aditya. I think with every passing generation, there is an incremental increase of IQ, an incremental sort of, actually an exponentially increasing ability to absorb.
Okay.
Simply because it's almost, I like to use this analogy a lot. It's almost like, generations of iPhones or laptops or iPads or whatever. You will see always the next generation is faster. uh, they process information faster. They have faster bandwidth.
Yeah.
And I jokingly like to say that I see a lot of the younger, uh, you know, younger students of music or younger artists who I come across, and it almost seems like their brains are fitted with some kind of AI.
Yeah.
There
Yeah.
are these people with this talent which is just like inconceivable, and this is how it should be. This is, I mean, we think it is a wonder, but it is actually a natural evolutionary process, because
Okay.
they're born with more information than the last generation or the generation before that.
Right.
So, I mean, while you say that they are result oriented, they are, but they are capable of actually receiving and transmitting at much higher speeds and with much higher efficiency. That being said, the one thing I compare, say our generation or myself or to a couple of generations, like when I listen to the music of the Eagles, for instance, okay, and
Mm-hmm.
it's very simple. Or when you listen to like rock and roll or even classical music from that era, or folk music, there was a certain timelessness in the approach, for the simple reason that probably the amount of information was less, so the
Okay.
pressure to cram in more information into shorter span of time was less. So I always advise my students or people I come across is to, the only thing they need to do, because they have all this information, it's a great blessing to have all this information, but
Yeah.
when you process it and deliver it to an audience, just a conscious effort to do a little less, to do, to think of people who came before you, and how it's a sense of contentment, to be
Hmm.
content with
Hmm. Hmm.
doing less, and therefore giving your audience also less to process in their heads. Because
Right.
remember, they're there in front of you to have a little fun, to probably get a little peace, to probably get into a realm of their own minds, without the stress of having to process too much information. So that's
Okay.
the advice I give them. So if you compare the two generations, or every sort of succeeding generation, I think there are things which are always getting better, but just this one aspect you need to maybe take a couple of steps back.
But is this just a question of availability of time? I'd like to understand, with a follow-up question, how important is this whole quality of sadhana that you and the previous generation and some of the successful younger generations really embody? So, what is this? What does sadhana represent? And is it just the ability of training your mind, or was it the relationship that you had with your Guruji? Or was it a much deeper holistic approach to music? What exactly is it?
Well, Aditya, it's all of the above. It's because you have that relationship with music itself,
Hmm.
you would want that kind of relationship with your guru, where you would be ready to um, give up a lot of things, a lot of other things, to take a deep dive. Uh, when you are taking a deep dive into your guru's life, you are essentially taking a deep dive into the music, because he or she is usually your portal, your gateway into the world that you want to dive into, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So therefore, the spirit of surrender, it's not, a lot of people make it out to be just an Indian, it's not. It's a value system which is again globally valid. When you go to a great master, when I go to a great master, I'm automatically bowing down to his or her greatness. I'm automatically, and that continues today also. I mean,
Okay.
I see. Of course, there are people who are not serious about anything they do. I'm not talking about those people. I'm not talking about the kind of people who just take a casual interest or who have, that's an attitude problem. If you think, oh yeah, I can do this. I mean, yeah, sure, you can do it. But, and you may have the chops, you may have the ability to play something really fast, but is it making a real impact in the minds of people when you're doing it fast? So I'm not talking about those kinds of people. I'm talking
Right.
about the people who are out there to this day, dedicating their lives to their master, dedicating their lives to the music, and then seeing the rewards. It is still the same. It's funny how the world changes, but how it's very interesting actually here. I mean, on a philosophy. Sorry, I'm giving you a longer answer.
No, no,
I
please,
feel I
please,
must go there.
please go ahead. Yeah.
It's funny that while the external universe is apparently evolving and reshaping, the internal universe of you know uh, this creature that is called man is so much the same and continues to be the same. It's, if you look at your internal universe, the yearnings, the need to know who you are and where you come from and where you go from here is the same. And that's what makes man create all this, create the external. So the external universe is a manifestation of what is inside your heart or your mind. And for there continue to be all these wonderful students of music who are still, and I bow down to their dedication and to their ability of being able to give up so many things in their quest for music.
Marvelous. I love how you articulated and how you elaborated on the entire idea. Very, very, very nice to hear that. I would now like to touch upon a little bit of fundamentals for my understanding, my personal understanding. When you play your instrument, I'm sure there is this process of internalization that precedes the expression. So, how do you go about working on this internalization when you say that I internalize a rag, for example? How do you internalize it?
So it's a uh, uh, it's multiple processes at work. Okay,
Okay.
the first and most uh, obvious and superficial step in my mind
Mm-hmm.
is the muscle memory which is at play. If
Okay.
it's raga or a harmonic progression, I always like to connect the musical cultures. So I always think of what it is in Western music, harmonic progression, or it could just be a melodic phrase, or in our case, a raga, or a murki, or a harkat, or a ornament, or whatever you are learning. It is just putting it in your muscle memory.
Okay.
That is the first and most obvious step. But then internally, the process that is at work is trying to generally cast light on every little nook and cranny of that particular melodic or harmonic expression. And
Mm-hmm.
you see that, and that's why we talk about practice. That's why we talk about doing something over and over and over and over again. We don't do it only to put it in our muscle memory.
Yeah.
Do it because every time you do it again, you will shed light on a little corner of it. You will discover a little it's like I mean, if I were to give you an analogy, it's a little bit like uh your own house. When we sometimes go through old drawers, old wardrobes. I certainly have been doing that because I was in Calcutta and we are trying to archive some old photos. Every time you will discover these things about a certain space, you'll see that, oh, I
Yeah.
didn't know this drawer opened like this. I didn't know that this light could be dimmed like this, things like that.
Yeah.
So when you do it over and over again, and then that has an impact on your muscle memory in turn.
Mm-hmm.
Then a lot of the other things are like I call it the Hansel Gretel
All right.
phenomenon, where you drop little crumbs of bread along the way. Like it
Mm-hmm.
may be a syncopated phrase, and
Mm-hmm.
you think, oh, this note hits this beat. So you drop little breadcrumbs. So as you keep doing that in your life, when you finally play it on stage,
Yeah.
all of that consciousness is in your mind, and it is there for you to draw upon it and interpret the phrase in that moment. Now, some of it will come out different every time. That's the interesting, that's the thing about improvised music, is because none of the information is for granted. It is there in the depths of your brain to draw upon in the moment, and then create something with that phrase in that moment, which was never created or will never be replicated. It's the same phrase.
Right. Many a times there's this constant struggle for the purity of the note that you mentioned, right? Ultimately, music is communicating at many subtle levels, like you mentioned, the subtle nuances, beyond just the reading or understanding of that clean note that you're trying to, pull off. There is emotional response to music, and how far do you think the purity also needs to extend and convey where you're coming from, rather than just the skill of playing that pure note?
So, Aditya, I think you're asking a very potent question, and I don't want to confuse my listeners with a very, what shall I say, a technical answer to that. So, to put it very simply, when you talk about purity in anything, when we talk about pure drinking water, what do we talk about? It is a process of distillation of undesired particles of information. When in a musical context, it's information. Undesired elements which you want to weed out. If you talk about a note or a phrase, and you talk, I come across this very frequently in the case of Indian music vis-a-vis Western music. So, I mean, I'm going to have to sing and demonstrate. See, when we say, let's take the instance of the raga Kirwani. Okay. So the common perception is Indian music is like this. Sa re ga ma pa, sa re ga ma pa da pa. It's always meandering, which it is. Ta pa ga sa re. But the thing is, sometimes ga, pa, ga, hitting that one note. All it takes is to weed out from your mind the need to focus on a lot of things which are around that note. It's a case of objective correlative, as it were. It is putting light directly on that note. And in the case of Western music also, it's interesting. Like, if you think of the reason I mentioned Kirwani is if you think of the piece called Spain by Chick Corea, which is such it's almost become an Indian jazz standard with all Indian people playing. So, when you think of the syncopation, da 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 da, so you have to think of how da da da, if there is full clarity of that note and that musical sort of expression with relation to time, nothing else in the moment, then you hit something pure. The moment you get sort of distracted by other information around it is when you are taking away. And that's all that there is to be said. There is no ISO 9002 stamp of purity. There isn't. This is somebody's perception of Kirwani. This is somebody else's perception. And it is a Western arpeggiated phrase. So when I'm coming after this whole arpeggio, when I'm coming back to the resolve on the pa, I'm just thinking of that pa and nothing else. And that's purity for you.
Lovely. I'm loving this conversation already. For someone like me who hasn't had any formal education or grounding in classical music, I really wish I could turn the clock back 20 years behind. And I were to sort of come to you and say that I want to learn music, what is it that you'd be looking for?
Well, it's funny you say that, because for the longest time I have wanted to, go to some music school, some music conservatory in the West, like a Berkeley school or something, and just forget the fact that I am a performer or that I do this for a living, and just sit down and learn about that whole other musical universe. Just absorb some information. I would, at some point in my life, love to take a sabbatical and uh, you know take in all these elements. So yes, to answer your question, what I am looking for, I ask myself this sometimes,
Yeah, yeah.
and with every passing day, it's the things which seemed so important, even a month ago.
Okay.
It's all perspective, Aditya, I tell you. And this is perspective which comes to you only with failure. You need
Mm,
failure for this. You
mm,
need to fall down, you need to fail, and gradually you realize that the things which seem important at one moment are not important in the very next moment. And
yeah,
gradually begin to realize that really the only thing I want to do is to uh, just get deeper into the music and nothing else, really, literally nothing else. If I can get uh, an inch, uh, if I can get my foot in the door an inch at a time, I am happy.
mm,
And of course, but I always say this, as a qualifier, is that people talk about uh, this musical quest, but there is one reality in life, which is your bills. When you get a bill at the end of the month, you got to pay it. So yes,
yeah,
I would have to pay my bills for sure,
yeah.
but the quest is uh, the be all and the end all.
Speaking of the
Because
quest,
sorry to interrupt you, but because
yeah,
there's a lot of joy in the quest.
right, right.
There's a lot of joy in the pain. There's a lot of joy in the pain of not knowing.
Mm,
Then there's incredible joy in knowing a little bit. But every time you know a little bit, there's so much you don't know.
right,
That's just like, think of it. It's like infinite joy going
yeah,
ahead in the future, because you're always feeling a little pain or a lot
yeah.
of, and then a lot of joy.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Elaborating on your idea of the whole quest, like for an artist, right from the time he or she starts learning music, there's this process that keeps continuing over time. There's evolution, there's growth, there's exploration in every possible sense. So, do you find that sometimes aspirations for your music change? We all want to be better in terms of what we do. Sometimes our objective changes as we grow older. One might seek lesser recognition and more perfection over time. Each person might have their own personal unfolding in terms of this whole idea. And you're still in your 40s, not even middle age for a performer. So, what inadequacies do you see in yourself, and how do you plan on overcoming them at this point of time?
Um, I think inherently, see, I'm a Virgo. So
Okay.
inherently, Virgos are born with a bit of a restless energy. We are
Mm.
born um, with a great need for perfection,
Mm-hmm.
which often borders on fastidiousness, and borders on this almost irritating amount of OCD.
Okay.
So but it often also leads to uh, the ability of achieving um, greater things, and
Yeah.
and so I recognized that deficiency earlier. I mean, I often noticed that nervous energy in me. I often noticed a restlessness. See, we are the kind of people, Virgos, and I don't know if I'm generalizing a bit too much, but I see
Okay.
it in myself for sure.
Okay.
It's often a restlessness to decode everything all at once.
All right.
Like if I get into something, like I'm a tech geek, okay, and if I
Mm.
do a new piece of hardware, let's just say it, like recently I picked up this little device which I use for my electric sitar, and I was trying to figure out tones and trying to EQ. Then that took me. So we have the tendency of getting into a rabbit hole, and getting into a rabbit hole, not in a good way, right?
Okay.
Where we tend to lose perspective on what the actual path was. Then you get into this rabbit hole and meander and go. So I'm trying to stay focused, and I try to always jump in but jump out. I see it as a strength and as a deficiency.
Right.
I see it as I see it as a strength in as much as I can jump in and go in deep and decode a lot of information, which makes me highly independent, which gives me the ability to EQ and get the sound that I want. But I also recognize that I need to jump out at the right time and focus on things which are more important in the moment.
All right. Speaking of accolades, what is the moment of triumph or of satisfaction and fulfillment for you? Coming from a musical family, was it the moment of appreciation and endorsement from your father while you performed on stage, or in general, I'd like to understand what have been some of the most gratifying moments in this pursuit so far?
I think every human being craves recognition. We are making the music for ourselves, yes, but at the same time, we must not lose sight of the fact that we are making the music for an audience. Okay.
Right.
So I think continually the need to have a good audience for your music cannot and should not be denied.
Okay.
The need for winning formal laurels or awards is also not entirely unreal, because despite the fact that we have been told and we know that that kind of euphoria it lasts only a day or two, because then then you're in the realm of what's next, because you might win an award from a local authority, and then you'll want to win it from the state, then you'll want to win it from the country, then you'll want to win it from the world, and then there's still a what next. So that in itself makes it a material pursuit. It's like wealth, like you might own a house, but then you'll see your neighbor owning 5 houses. You might own a car which is of a certain make or brand, but you might see. So you can never satisfy yourself, I feel, with that. But on a very empirical, I remember, this takes me back many years to the time when I played for a little gathering of people in the house of a relative of mine.
Yeah.
Literally all I wanted to see was my father happy with my playing. I mean, this is what you should do.
All right.
And a day before yesterday, I played a concert in Kolkata, which is my hometown. And I mean, I don't live there anymore. I live in Bombay, but that's where I grew up. And my parents were there. So my father was in the audience. And I was on stage and, of course, playing my music for myself and for an entire audience out there. And yet I realized that, this need to get appreciation from my dad is so deep-seated.
Yeah.
And it's not necessarily a bad thing, really. Like it's funny. It's how some things never change. So, but I think with every passing day, you slowly learn to have a bird's eye view. You learn to zoom out. Whenever you feel like you have a sort of a very zoomed in view of things, you kind of zoom out. You tend to kind of zoom out and see things. So you asked me a little while ago about Unbounded, about what it brought for me and what it didn't. So
Yeah, yeah.
when you zoom out, then you get the real picture. At the end of the day, Aditya, if you zoom out, you'll realize that you make an album, it's one among maybe 50,000 albums made that year, you
Yeah,
know,
yeah.
music, right? And if you look at my 47 years of existence, or 50 years of existence, or if somebody lives to 100 years also, it's just 100 years. If you look at the life of the
Yeah.
uh, of human civilization, or the life of the planet, come on, I mean, what can you do? How much can
Mm.
you impact? Even if you do something that you are going to leave with humanity, it's going to be 100 years, couple of 100 years.
Yeah.
So live it in the moment, and just see if it impacts you. Because
Mm.
the mind, as I said, your mind, it's a universe unto itself.
Yeah.
You don't know where, on which journey you will be taking it, if you live it well.
Right, right. You did mention you have a very special connection with Kolkata. Even I did a little bit of my preschool and things like that in Kolkata, and it's such a beautiful city to be in. Of course, like the music, for the appreciation of music and art. It's a great place to be at. And also, you did mention about house concerts, right? So, since we are on the topic of music, you also did mention Shakti celebrated their 50th anniversary in terms of leaving behind a
They
legacy.
continue to. They're
Yeah,
still.
yeah, exactly. So they left behind a legacy, allowing future generations to be inspired in terms of keeping it alive. From your generation, who are trying to keep it alive, who are some of the other contemporaries who are trying to keep it real and alive? As a matter of fact, the podcast partner for Stalwarts of Music is this company called Perpetual Buzz Experiences. They collaborated with Mr. Mahesh Kale to promote a great deal of indie music, right? So I was told that by my podcast partner that you played a wonderful house concert at the Bay Area at the Ballman, along with
Indeed. Yes,
Rakesh Chaurasia and Ojas.
indeed.
So, what is your generation doing in terms of preserving these musical traditions? And I would also like to know about your experience at Mr. Mahesh Kale's place in terms of the
So
performance.
first up, Mahesh Bhai is an incredible human being.
Yeah, yeah,
It goes without saying he's an incredible artist, but he's an incredible human being. And what I observe in this, uh, I mean, I'm proud to call him a dear friend. What I
mm-hmm.
observe in him, and I certainly think it is aspirational, is the amount of passion he has, not only, but the amount of follow through he has. Every vision in his life, he follows through and sees it to the end. This is an important thing.
Yeah,
So many of us have this vision, or this uh, great amount of drive to start with, and then somewhere we drop the ball uh,
mm.
on things. But Mahesh Bhai is not one of those people, and he's somebody who's set up this beautiful ecosystem in the Bay Area, and
Yeah,
he has this organization called, with a great deal of support from his wonderful wife Purva.
yeah,
So he and Rakesh Bhai. Now you asked me to mention contemporary, so I have to mention Rakesh Bhai, because he is truly somebody I look up to. He is a dear friend, a colleague, somebody who's like family for me. And we've actually gone through so much. We've been playing music together for so many years, and I see his path, his journey in music, and I feel nothing but a great sense of pride in my heart, because he's come from being um, the torchbearer of this great legacy, that he
yeah,
inherited from Uncle Pandit Hari Prasad Chaurasia, to having such an individualistic voice of his own. And today he stands for a great tradition, but he
mm-hmm.
also stands for a great deal of innovation within that tradition. And I mean, I single out his name. There are so many others. I single out his name because he's been one of my closest collaborators, somebody who's really meant a lot to me. I mentioned Shankar Mahadevan ji as a mentor. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
I've been incredibly fortunate to make music with him uh,
Okay, okay,
on numerous occasions, and he's never, I mean, like, made me feel like uh, I mean, beside him, I'm just a student of music. I
Right.
mean, I'm just a student of music, but he's a musical giant, but he's always made me feel like like a collaborator. He's always made me feel like I could also add something to the music. And
Mm.
that's a very important point that I would like to make, Aditya, is that now Zakir Bhai, I can't even count him amongst. I'm lucky to be born in the same time,
Mm.
like to exist in the same time. Of course, I was born much
Yeah.
later, but to exist in the same time as him. But this is one thing which is so important. Of the many times that I have had the great privilege and opportunity of playing with him on stage,
Mm.
he's always made me feel like somebody who he would uh, want to add value,
Okay.
not as somebody who's just there to do a job.
Yeah. Yeah.
He will coerce you
Mm.
to bring something to the table,
Right.
and will convince you that he is taking notice
Yeah.
when you are bringing something to the table, which is so very important. I mean, I am uh, in with all my gurus or all my mentors. I have, you travel this path and you go from being in awe of them, and awe creates a little distance. And this is something that Zakir Bhai told me at one point. And from starting from there and then going to a point where they let you a little bit into their lives, and then
Mm.
one day you're like, hang on, I mean, I was like, just to be around this person was like daunting, and now I'm comfortable in their presence. And that's the sign of a great mentor, is when they can open doors, little doors in your little in your mind, and give you the confidence to be who you are.
Lovely.
Yeah.
Uh, you travel a great deal abroad. You have a lot of. I think you have a very intense tour coming up across the world. A lot of musicians from your generation and those older than you who've sort of traveled to the West decide to relocate. They tend to live abroad mostly and visit India. Do you think you've made a conscious choice in terms of being here, like being here
Uh,
in India?
Certainly in my earlier years, when I was mid 20s,
Hmm.
I had a couple of opportunities of um, trying to make a home for myself elsewhere in the world. But I think at that point, for sure, I made a conscious choice, because I felt like I had to play music in India for an Indian audience for a few years.
Okay.
Um, at this point in my life, I would love to see. It's not just about relocating,
Yeah.
just living somewhere. You could live anywhere in the world,
Hmm.
but for us, a lot of who we are is defined by what we do. So
Okay.
sure, I would love to live in some other country of the world. I really don't care about lifestyle anymore. Our country has progressed so much that we have
Hmm.
everything at our disposal. We are lucky that you can live in the city of Bombay, where I live now, and
Hmm.
literally eat any kind of food. Literally, anything which is lifestyle. Uh, uh, Anything which has got to do something with lifestyle
Yeah.
is available to us. I mean, you
Right.
just have to earn enough money for it.
Right.
But if I live somewhere abroad, I would want to have the right kind of thing to do. And if
Hmm.
opportunity comes along, I would love to go ahead and grab it.
Fair enough. In the interest of time, I'd like to come to the last part of our agenda,
Sure.
which is a small and fun rapid fire. Let's see how you do in terms of the rapid fire. Right. So
Let's see.
first,
I've always been bad at them, so I'm going to give it a shot.
yeah, let's see. So first question for you, what is that one song that always makes you cry?
Shankar Mahadevan's Ma.
Oh, wow. Great choice.
I'm very incredibly fond of that song.
On the contrary, what is your favorite guilty pleasure song?
This, it's funny. There are these songs which are uh, very unlikely, you would think that it's unlikely that they'll stick in your head,
Mm-hmm.
and then they do.
Okay.
And that's part of the reason for their success. When I was I think about a decade ago, I heard Gangnam Style. Is it called Gangnam Style? I think it's called
Yeah,
Gangnam.
PSY.
This
Yeah.
is very
Yeah.
popular, YouTube song. I looked at it as something which I wanted to know why it has so many views, and it
Right.
just stuck to my head. Sometimes, I'll go back to it and look at it for
Mm.
sure.
Mm.
I don't know what kind of pleasure. There's some pleasure in, in seeing
Okay.
that. Yeah.
If you had the ability or the chance to put together an all-star jazz fusion band, who would be part of it?
I think I would bring the entire ensemble of Unbounded.
Unbounded.
That would be, yeah.
Incredible. Incredible. What are the
I mean,
top?
Unbounded for me it was almost, it was surreal because it was like living a dream. If I could do that on stage.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What are the top two qualities of a teacher that you have learned in your earlier days that you personally embody right now in terms of music?
I think the top quality of all time is to look at your student as an equal,
Mm-hmm.
as a friend,
Yeah.
because the transmission of knowledge or the transmission of information is never a one-way street.
Mm.
As you are transmitting, they are receiving, but they're also transmitting. It's almost like a ping.
Mm.
So I've seen this quality in a few of my mentors.
Okay.
And of course, there is respect. And of course, you
Mm.
have to command respect with every aspect of your behavior as either a teacher or a student.
Right.
But you cannot impede the transmission of information by creating this wall or creating this great deal. Then you have no business of
Okay.
being a teacher. So yeah, I've seen this in many great teachers, and I try to imbibe this quality.
Okay. One last question for today. Down in the distant horizon, what would you like to be remembered as?
Oh, you should see my Instagram bio.
Okay.
And I call myself a sitar explorer. I would, if there was a visual that I would add, if I could add a visual, there's this Tintin comic book.
Yeah.
Where he goes to the moon.
Yeah.
And so there's a rocket.
Yeah.
With Tintin sitting on it, and you can see the moon at the distance. I would be sitting on a sitar and exploring. That's my book.
Great answer for a closure. And I would love to see that artwork in very soon, probably a comical artwork of you on a sitar. Maybe you could.
We can have AI do it for us these days.
Yeah, for sure. So thank you so much, Purbayan.
Thank you for having me on your wonderful show. And I wish you all the best, because you're really doing something very, very special. And I've checked out a few of your interviews, and they're all very incisive and amazing. So I'm privileged to be a part of it.
I'm glad once again. This interview will be additionally aired on Big FM Shillong and Aizawl on the Sunday primetime show between 5 to 6 p.m. So be sure to check it out, people in the northeastern part of India. And it'll additionally be on my YouTube channel in an audio video format, and will be streaming across all audio streaming platforms too. So I'll be sure to share the link once it's out. It might be out in the next couple of weeks. Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
So thank you. It's been an incredible blessing, privilege, and
totally
honor.
mutual.
Yeah.
Totally.
Take care. Have a great day, and have a fun time in Pune.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye.